feel like trying to find that spot and it still don't work. No, it's recording. It wasn't recording.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is a zoning variance hearing on the request of Felix Stenger of 2945 Woodcliff to allow the construction of a roof of the existing deck, creating a combined side yard setback of 16 feet 9 inches instead of the required 24. And an introduction by zoning administrator Alec Huziker.
Hello, everyone. We have a zoning variance request. The applicant is Dave Henko of Feenstra & Associates on behalf of the property owner Philip Stenger of 2945 Woodcliff Circle in order to construct a roof over an existing deck on the west side of the house. So here's the property survey submitted with the application. The deck is located right there on the west side of the property. The deck will stay the same size. There'll be no addition to the deck. However, the roof will overhang about 1.5 feet over the deck, leaving a setback of approximately 10.3 feet on that side of the house, which would be compliant in terms of a least side setback. However, in addition to the 6.6 feet on the opposite side of the house, they are short for the combined total side yard setback. The property did receive a zoning variance back in 2011 for a very similar request. For a reduced total side yard setback in order to construct a roof over that same deck, and also to renovate the first floor and to add another bedroom on the second floor. The applicant never followed through with that request, and so after 24 months, the request becomes null and void, and so now they've come back to the commission to ask again. Looking at the standards of review, the first one being that there's special conditions or circumstances that exist particular to the lands. The house was built in 1950, then remodeled in 1959, very close to that east property line where that 6.6 feet setback is located. The construction further remodeled in 2002 put the house at a 14.4 foot setback on the west side of the house, in which they received a zoning variance for that as well. Looking at special conditions or circumstances, the property and house has been the same since 2011 when they initially asked for the same variance. There's been no changes there. Same applicant and property owner as well. And the roof going over the existing deck would only be a few feet closer to that side property line than the 14.4 feet, which is currently the closest part of the house to that west property line. If there's any further questions, I'd be happy to answer. And I'll put a good drawing of what they're proposing to cover the deck with.
Alec, I do have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the house is on an angle on the parcel,
Mm-hmm.
does that? It looks as if it never met the 24-foot side yard setback. Is that correct? I mean, it really could not have happened. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. So they received a zoning variance in 2002 for a reduced side yard setback to have that 14.4 feet, which exists there today. So anything close to that property line would require a variance.
And the 11.8, that's where the deck is?
Correct.
Okay. And when they made their requests for the previous variance,
Mm-hmm.
was that almost the exact same thing that they're requesting now, or was it different in any way?
In terms of like what the measurements were, or they were asking for the same reduced side yard setback in order to construct a roof over that deck. The measurements were a few inches off based on the plans back then, but basically the same request.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So essentially the same request, just a re-request because the old one expired.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we'll open it up for public comment, and we let the applicant speak first, if the applicant is here to speak to this.
Yes, good evening. I'm Dave Hanko with Feedstras. Yeah, it's a fairly simple request, so if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
My only question is, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, or if Mr. Stenger would know the answer to this, have you spoken with the immediate neighbor there at 2935, that would be closest to this deck and gotten their input or kind of verbal okay with this?
I have not.
We haven't received any, just confirming kind of officially here, we've not received any sort of communication from anyone with regards to this variance request, correct?
No.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything? Okay.
Good evening. Steve Williams, 1038 Wren. I'm a neighbor to the property. I don't object to the proposed side setback reduction, but I do have a question about that. And that what is the health or safety purpose of the setback, and does this impede that in any way? I expect that's a question for Alan more than, do you know why? What is the health or safety concern that's
Of having setbacks?
of having that setback, a particular setback?
I believe setbacks are there to protect adjacent property owners
From,
people constructing right at the property lines, and there's also safety concerns for getting emergency vehicles behind buildings and such.
so 5 feet or something like that would, if both had 5, you'd have 10 feet, so you could get a vehicle in, so that there's plenty of room.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else here to speak to this agenda item? No? Okay, so I'll close public comment. Bring it up here to the commission. Could I get a motion, please?
Motion to approve the variance as requested as outlined in agenda item number 6, with the condition that the deck area will not be enclosed.
Support. Second. Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I do want to briefly comment on this. I do think that this variance request meets the standards for approval from the standpoint of kind of the unique situation of this house on this lot, which was not caused by the applicant. It's my understanding that the house has been in this configuration going all the way back to 1959, and therefore really creates a necessity for variances from what the total setbacks would be when you combine both of the 2 side yards. In addition, I think that this would not be a detriment to the neighboring property, would not be contrary to the spirit and purpose of the chapter, just in terms of covering, a roof covering an existing deck, so it's not an actual encroachment of any, certainly not of any significance towards the neighbor's property. The deck is already there. Would not seem to me to be a material change here. Don't see any concerns with regards to safety issues in terms of access of public safety equipment or what have you. Looks like there's plenty of space for them to be able to do that. And of course, the fact that this variance has been previously granted is an important factor as well. So I think there's ample basis for this variance to be granted.
I agree with Brian's analysis. I think this is clearly satisfies the factors. The only thing I'd like to add is looking at the overhead viewer map, which is in our packet. This house has a very unique alignment within its parcel. It just happens that neither of the adjacent houses really come up right to the lot line, and where the variance would be granted. So I'm even more comfortable with that, looking at that just subjectively. But I have no problem with this.
I know that we had just mentioned about the process of going through this. We wanted to adhere to the BZA training protocol, so I feel like I need to walk through these criteria and just discuss why I would be supporting this variance. I think because, you know, it did go through a previous remodel, and I also, what really strikes me is just the shape of the lot and how there never really was a 24-foot side yard setback in any spot that I could tell. So no matter what happens, you would need to approve a variance for any sort of construction or anything that would occur on this home. The special conditions or circumstances that don't result from the actions of the applicant. The applicant hasn't done any action that would cause this variance. The authorizing of a variance will not be of substantial detriment, which clearly it is not. There's still space for emergency vehicles and things of that nature, so there's no impediment for that. And I do agree that we should make sure that we have the condition that the deck is not enclosed. Anybody else?
I just wanted to add that with regards to letter C of the conditions or standards for review, it is noted that it's heavily screened from the neighbor's property with some fairly substantial landscaping. The neighbor's property immediately to the west is also slightly higher in elevation, so an initial concern I had was about runoff from the roof, but it doesn't appear that there would be any concern about that because it is a higher elevation over there. So I too have no concerns about this variance.
Yeah, no concerns, it makes sense to me.
Okay, great, thank you. I too, I agree that the standards have all been met, and a similar, almost same variance was approved and never acted upon in 2011. I find no reason to not approve this. So, you already added in the motion that the deck needed to be not enclosed?
Correct.
Okay, so we're set with that. Okay, so we can go ahead and take a vote? Okay, so all those in favor of approving this variance, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So the next item on the agenda is the item number 7, permit application for distributed antenna systems, tower installations, and introduction by City Manager Doug LeBeau.
Okay, so you recall in the past several months, we've looked at some ordinance changes in the zoning code, chapter 50, specifically sections 5.75E, and also the addition of 79D with respect to distributed antenna systems, also otherwise known as small cell applications. This past year, the FCC has issued Order 18-133, and the state of Michigan has approved Public Act 366 of 2018 that really spells out where local units of government are able to intervene as far as what types of restrictions so that we can put in place here in the state of Michigan. Now, we've had some conversations at previous meetings and some public comment about some of the other things that other states and cities in some of those states are doing. But unfortunately, here in the state of Michigan, we have that table kind of set in terms of what we can regulate and we can't regulate. So at our November 4th meeting, we did approve both of those ordinance changes, and with the understanding that staff would be bringing back the actual permit itself for consideration by the end of the year, which we have before you this evening. We did also create, in terms of trying to help everybody kind of go through what the permit requirements are, a permit checklist, which is the last page in that section there. It's a front and back page there that really give us a sense of a checklist to go through each one of those requirements. So in terms of mapping of locations, the wireless unit specifications that we're allowed to regulate in terms of size and placement. Also, in terms of spacing, certification documents. A couple pieces that we heard from some of the public comment that we were not able to require the applicants in the industry to do really with respect to disclosures. So with staff conversations, we looked at if we can't require the applicants to provide certain disclosures, that the city would do that as part of, we would take that on ourselves as a way to make sure that we can have that outreach to the community. So under section 6 on the small cell wireless permit checklist, which is also noted in the actual permit application itself, a couple sections I want to highlight is the notice to the impacted public that the city would provide that to properties within 300 feet of a location where a permit has been issued for co-location, installation, or construction, and that we would provide the contact information necessary to the provider for residents. And the other piece would be that the staff would maintain a web page that includes all the locations where they are with the contact information, and also the FCC RF certification. Since again we can't require the providers to do that here in the state of Michigan, this is something that staff feels that we can undertake to kind of take some of those on from some of the concerns that we heard. I would just also note that the overall permit itself is also in conjunction with the ordinances that were approved, are part of a process that a consortium that East Grand Rapids participated in with 20 other communities here in West Michigan. So we had a good framework that's out there, and we went ahead and made some modifications specifically with the items that I noted there with respect to disclosures to the public for what you have before you this evening. And again, I would just note that depending on what any future legal challenges, or whether they're successful or not, or if there's change at the legislature or regulations from the FCC, depending on what those are, we may need to look at ordinance changes. However, if they fit within the guidelines of what we have in place, we can make just the change to the actual permit itself. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And we've decided that, we've delegated, or you otherwise have the authority to implement this permit based on our last vote and what have you. We're not voting again tonight. This is an informational point, or
well, tonight would be to actually vote to approve the actual permit itself, which actually fits. It's compliant with our existing ordinances and as I know, the state statute and federal regulations. Okay. So this permit itself, we're asking for formal approval from the city commission.
I appreciate you. The checklist, I think, is extremely helpful, and I appreciate you pointing out some of the additional obligations that the city is taking on to try to be more communicative with residents, be more transparent, make information available beyond what the providers are required to provide up themselves. So I'm very appreciative of those changes in the permit. Is there anything else, I'm not saying there should be, but is there anything else that either you or Mr. Huff would point to that has kind of changed at all from what was presented to us back in November in terms of kind of the draft template from the Grand Valley Metro Council in terms of what their recommendations were for a format for this?
I'll go first, but beyond the items that I noted with respect to disclosures, there wasn't anything beyond that that would be outside of that framework.
Yeah, we also did have Tim Lundgren of our office, you've all met, go through the permit after Doug had worked it up and made some minor modifications, but generally this is pretty much the Grand Valley model that we are confident in compliance with our ordinance as well.
Doug, it said, so the FCC RF compliance certification, do you know, happen to know what kind of information is provided there? Is there any sort of information about, strength of the signal, directions of the signal, anything like that?
Right, so they'll actually just They will provide us for the equipment that they're looking to install a certification that they meet that bandwidth. So what we will do is provide that to, in our notification to residents adjacent to that, but also to the greater community by posting that certification on our website.
Mr. Lepage, I think it's admirable that you've taken on the responsibility for this additional notification that we can't require the providers to do. I am wondering, I mean, I know you have a lot of your plate, city staff does as well. How many of these do we anticipate being in East overall?
That's a good question, a difficult one, because part of the state statute actually, we're not allowed to actually even ask the questions of the industry for what their business plan is, et cetera. So we only have one location right now. I do anticipate that with 5G implementation across the country, that we will see probably sooner than later an application. In terms of how many, what the numbers are, I think that's probably scalable to the size of the community. We're 3.4 square miles. What I've seen in the layout in some other communities, in terms of what they have in place currently, tends to be on more major transportation corridors and in population density centers or near large employers where they're dealing with, I believe they're dealing with bandwidth issues. So that's in terms of what we think we see out there, where I think we would see deployment potentially of small cell here at least.
Yeah. I guess in connection with that previous question, my only thought is that if either the workload of providing that additional disclosure becomes unmanageable, or this becomes in the future generally accepted as something that's everywhere and people know what they need to know about it and become less concerned about this being a new technology, then I'd be in favor of allowing you to drop that and just go with the state mandated disclosure or federally mandated disclosure of providers.
Yeah, I think if we ran into some obstacles in terms of what we're capable of doing at staff level, we certainly would bring that forward to the commission for further consideration. And it'll be, we'll see what we see. I think that it's still a new rollout, and in terms of managing that, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that. But certainly, if we ran into the issues, we bring that forth to the commission for consideration.
Did you mention something before about if they were to fill out an application or submit the permit, there's a certain number that of those nodes that can be included in a permit?
Correct. So 20 is the number for one permit. So we actually included that right at the top of the permit application, up to 20 locations per applicant at a time. So that is something, again, we're talking in terms of what's allowed under state law that they allow, so that the providers don't have to go through a permit for every single location.
So if other municipalities have a permit application like this, and I'm assuming they probably do have something like this, that same number will be on their permit as well, up to 20?
Correct.
Per permit, okay.
Just one point of clarification, is it 20 combined co-locations and new pole locations?
I believe it's 20 per applicant.
Okay. Because they could apply for, can they only apply for co-locations?
They could do both.
They could do both, okay. All right.
We certainly want to encourage co-location. Yes.
And how do you plan to alert the residents? What's the best way to do that?
So what we've recommended here that the city would do is similar to zoning variances. We would note the location of the small cell installation and notify all residents within 300 feet with that notification and contact information. And then we would also then update every time we have an application for installations on a map that we would host on our webpage on the city's website, where we would provide that, who the applicant is, and also contact information, as well as the RF emission certification.
Yeah, I want to also thank you again for putting the disclosure portion on the permit and taking that on, because I know that the city has a lot on their plate, but providing that information to our residents is important, especially initially going forward. We're all kind of learning about this technology and what it's going to eventually look like. So thank you for doing that. Any other questions? Okay, so so I guess, just ask for a motion. And a second, please.
Motion to approve the small cell permit for East Grand Rapids?
And a second?
Second.
Okay, and so, goes to a vote, so all those in favor, please say yes.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second?
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
So now we will actually be leaving to conduct an executive session. We will be coming back into chambers, so if you would like to stay. We do have a work session after, so feel free to stay. Oh, yes, sorry. So I'd like to ask a motion to conduct an executive session in a second.
Motion to conduct an executive session?
Second?
Perfect. And we do a roll call vote, right?
Mayor Favale,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Duncan,
Yes.
Commissioner Peck.
Yes.
Can I get
Go
clarification
ahead.
for a second? Because the executive session relates to an issue that I'm recusing myself from, should I abstain from the vote?
I think so.
And I will also be abstaining for the same reason.
Not sure what happened, it just wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi.
Keep a signal anywhere else. Is it just that number that is on the signal?
So if you talk to Gary and say, which, once we get the streams, it won't matter, but even still, he should know that
So
there's
that means
something
the
wrong.
thing's probably out.
That it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't work tonight.
Just kept trying to.
And then it was recording, so that was good, but then I messed it up when I tried to switch it to my phone, so.
So we just posted something that said, for those of you trying to watch it,